on. It is 2024 now, finally. And we have just passed Martin Luther King Day, heading straight toward celebration of Black History Month. So we are tracking well into this new year now. We wanted to start this new year off by setting the bar high with today's guest and pushing into some big subjects. Many of them stirred up due to the nation's unrest around the world, and also some of the subjects that are popping up because of some of that unrest. And we think about maybe human trafficking and child safety, refugee conditions around the world, economic issues, and peace, for sure, peace. We will be talking about these topics with the Honorable Dr. Teta B. Banks, and she is a diplomat, human rights advocate, and educator. Originally from Liberia, she grew up, though, in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States, the daughter of the late Dr. Victoria Banks and Reverend Dr. A.A. Banks, Jr., who was a civil rights colleague of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and Mrs. Rosa Parks. Wow, how perfect to be talking to you just days after the Martin Luther King Day celebration. She holds the position as chair of the World Federation of United Nations Association. So we're very excited to talk to her about that organization, find out a little bit more about that. And the rest of Dr. Banks's background, we'll get to know from her. But by my side today is a familiar face, and he is the founder of Saharan Open University himself, a well-accomplished education expert who also holds expertise in global trade, commerce, and international relations, Dr. Osita Aniemeka. So let's get into it, shall we? Dr. Aniemeka, I want to put you up first to talk a little bit about your background and share a little bit about what you're doing through the Saharan Open University.
Thank you, Mary, and it's an honor to meet you, Dr. Banks. My name is Osita Aniemeka. I'm Nigerian. I come from the southern part of Nigeria. My state is Delta. My state is one of those that have been in trouble because that's where the oil comes from. Apart from that, I work for non-profit and for profit. I have concerned myself with the development of my country and my continent. In the last 10 years, I have been working for the Central Bank of Nigeria, trying to train young people, young youth and young people to become entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators. So, as a matter of fact, that's how I met Mary about 6-7 years ago. We got tied into a couple of things, that we've been working with. But the story won't be good enough if I don't tell you how I transited from my job with the Central Bank to what I do now for development. During the the process of growing these entrepreneurs, I was once called the program director for the region with entrepreneurs. But funny enough, I didn't find these entrepreneurs in class. I couldn't find them to train, and I had some money for them, from CPN. So I went looking for them, and I said to them, "Why are you not in class? Why don't you come for my program?" They were looking at me. They were just staring at me, and one of them said, "Who the hell do you think you are? How can I leave my shop? How can I leave my, my words and come and sit for 3-4 months in your class for what? What do you have to tell me?" And I said, "I have some money for you so that you can grow your business." They said, "How much?" "We already have money. We have been trained. So please leave us alone." I did that for 2 years and it didn't work. So one day it just occurred to me. I said to them, "What if I bring it to you? What if I bring what I have to you?" They say, "Yeah, that's what they want to hear. That they want to be able to sit in their place of work and receive any kind of education that I'm bringing to them." That was how the Open University, struck me. So now we take it to them. We are helping them create different kinds of energy. We are imputing data, to their work, because these are apprentices trained with the rural and the old methods. So now it is possible for them to look forward, to assess the world from where they are, because there is connectivity. So in doing that, I have also been able to find a few things that will matter to them. And Mary and I tried what we call Y Mentors, World where the youth mentors. We are trying to find how we can help them meet people that are not Nigerian, or maybe they're Nigerian, but they're not in the environment. So we are giving them global exposure, some international possibilities for them to learn what other people are doing elsewhere. And these people that are doing this are the ones they call the Igbos. The Igbos are everywhere in the world. These are the people who are known for enterprise. So what we are doing now is to find a way to create opportunities for them to talk to people who are trading like them, who are entrepreneurs like them, but in different environments that can bolster their content. It makes it easier for them to be able to compete with the rest of the world. And if you must know this, these are people who might not have been educated in the real sense of it. They didn't go past high school. And then now they are speaking to the rest of the world. This is because we have been able to inject some content that is helping them grow themselves, because it became a challenge for them to be able to trade everywhere else in the world. They are in China, they are in the United States, they're in North America, really, they are in Europe. So these are the people also who now, some of them live in the diaspora. They are the ones who are making money and sending money back home, which is part of our development process. If you know what Africa is doing, with leadership, you know that not every African country is buoyant enough to look after themselves, because the people at the head are not letting development reach the grassroots. So families depend on these people who are living outside Nigeria to be able to, to do stuff, to be able to live well. Maybe they're not living so well, but at least they are able to look forward to whatever is coming from diaspora for their own survival. So yes, as we do this, we get attractive, we get attention. Last year, one of the states called Niger State of Nigeria, it is the state that shares boundaries with the federal capital. Niger State, the seat of government there is Mina State. I was invited by the Commissioner for Education to help them find development strategies that would grow the state and also help them, show examples of what can happen in Nigeria. That also too, I am doing with Mary Kurek. Mary is Vice President of the Saharan Open University. We've been doing content development together. And we have been ambitious, we're very ambitious, trying to help people who otherwise might not have reached that status, help them get their hands into it, begin to learn on their own what they can do, to make development work for us. As you know, Africa, that is not an easy thing to do, because Africa looks up to anybody from outside the continent for charity. We want to end all of that. We want to end all of that. We want to begin to give them the power, the capacity, the competence, and the courage to be able to do things for themselves. So if they are relating with anybody from outside the continent, it will be on partnership basis. It will be on work-for-work basis, so that they can also teach their people how to work and live well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Aniemeka. So we turn to Dr. Banks. Wow, when I read your bio, and I know Osita felt the same way, it was amazing. What all you have accomplished in your life has just been tremendous. So other than what I shared at the beginning of the little bit of your beginning, back us up a little bit. Tell us what brought you into the work that you're doing with the World Federation there, and a little bit when you get to that place of the World Federation, we want to hear a little bit more about what it is that the organization does and what you do with it. Okay.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me on, and it's an honor to meet both of you, and congratulations on this whole series and the efforts and the mission of Frontrunners. I came into the United Nations Association after I was appointed Honorary Consul General of the Republic of Liberia. I was appointed during a transitional period in the government. As you know, Liberia went through a civil war and there were several iterations and transitional governments. And so when I was in Philadelphia, the ambassador visited and said that we need, assistance and organizations and resources in the Philadelphia area were going to be quite useful. And could there be a consulate there? And so knowing that I was from Liberia and had kept in touch with many of the people in Liberia and organizations that work with Liberia, so the appointment came about. And then of course, going through the transitional period, and then we went into the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Liberia. And so I served as a consultant on that. And it was at that point that in Philadelphia, some members approached me about joining the United Nations Association. I said, well, that's a perfect match because this is a way that we can have additional input and assistance, not through a non-diplomatic way, but through civil society.
Yeah.
I joined at that point, and then from then went into the national meetings, became chair later of the United Nations Association USA, and then most recently became chair of the World Federation. So the United Nations Association was developed under by Eleanor Roosevelt. So when the UN was established, she felt civil society had a responsibility, and the UN would need civil society to help carry on the mission and the goals of the United Nations and the support. And so she set about going across the country, establishing UN associations, and then it spread in 1947 to the global. So currently we have over 100 nations that are members of United Nations Association, and we work as an arm of the UN. We are the civil society arm of it. So in fact, next week, for example, we hold monthly meetings with the president of the UN Security Council. Every month that presidency rotates. And what we do, we sponsor these dialogues where we sit and invite other NGOs and CSOs in to have conversations, dialogues to see what is the agenda. Have you thought about these issues, and even bring issues to the Security Council? And certainly as we talk about all of the conflicts that are going on now, we question, what are the techniques, what are the methods, what's being done in this area, what's being done in Haiti. And so we serve like a sounding board. And all of the presidents that we have had these sessions with have concluded and made remarks that we need to hear more from civil society. This is very helpful to us as diplomats in terms of how we go forward. And not only hearing from us, but actually using civil society organizations in countries to assist UN missions in those countries. For example, now in Liberia and other countries where the UN missions are no longer there because those countries have either been considered stable or too far not to be able to do it. But where there is not a UN mission necessarily, this is where civil society will be, relied on to carry on or to do some of the work, because they know what's going on in that country and they know what will work, what may not work. As we're talking, in fact, I'll be in New York next week for our session with the exit. This is what we call the exit briefings. So on the UN Security Council, there are a certain number of nations that rotate. There are permanent members, the P5, and then there are those that rotate. So we are getting ready to rotate the members of the Security Council. So what World Federation does, we hold a briefing of those members that are exiting. And they get to answer questions and share their experiences. They tell us what the challenges have been during their tenure and what are their recommendations for incoming members to the UN Security Council, as well as just the recommendations for the UN Security Council overall in terms of moving forward. One of the major contributions that have been made about that is that one of the techniques that the UN Security Council and the UN as a whole is using regional organizations to assist in the work of conflict resolution. So Dr. Osita, you're very familiar with ECOWAS. So regions have these civil organizations that have said, okay, we will help in terms of looking at what's going on in our region, assist any type of diplomatic or otherwise energies that are going on. And it takes the concerted effort of fellow nations in those regions to assist in resolutions. So a prime example in West Africa has been ECOWAS for a number of years. And we're now using those types of organizations in the Middle East. The question that I posed that will be presented next week to those exiting members is, how effective have those regional organizations been? What do they need? How much more or in what other ways can these regional organizations assist in resolving conflict? When we get to an impasse such as we are in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, as we get to an impasse, it will take those neighboring countries, because they have a vetted interest. It's going to affect them. Dr. King, if we're talking about Dr. King, said what affects one directly affects all indirectly. So we very much realize that. So we can't just wait on one diplomat doing something or one unit doing something. It takes that concerted effort. And that's what the World Federation, that's what we do. So we bring people together. We work in terms of what's going on in our areas. How can we assist? And the ultimate goal is to ensure peace and justice and equality. So how do we do that? Whether we're talking about women's rights or gender equality, whether we're talking about a sustained government that is effective, whether we're talking about the environment or social responsibility of corporations that come into nations such as Nigeria, oil companies, and the effects of what they're doing in those countries. The people of the country or in that area may not be able to have the voice and the connections to be able to share what the problems are. So that's why these other countries or these other organizations can say, look, you can't go into a country and get all your money out of the resources and then pollute the area and have no responsibility. So it takes that international pressure on certain entities to ensure that the right thing is being done. So the World Federation, as I said, many of the countries, have one UNA there, and then we meet every 3 years we communicate all during, regularly, but we have our plenary meeting every 3 years to assess where we are, to assess where are some hotspots that may need to be addressed, to assess how effective NGOs have been and what other partnerships can be developed.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea the breadth of all of the work that is being done and how strong the bridge is between you and the United Nations itself. And then the fact that you open doors to CSOs and
Yes.
as well as NGOs. For people who don't know, the community service organizations, this is a little bit smaller version of an NGO, I guess is what you would say, and more community driven types of organizations. Osita, as you were talking about, Niger State and what we were working on with the education ministry there, are there any questions you might have of Dr. Banks that might be relative to some of the projects that are coming forward this upcoming year?
Yes, thank you so much for your, I don't know how to put it. It's your resume tells me that new things that I got to know about how people are saving the world. This year, this issue of civil society involvement in peace and development is fantastic. I don't think there can be a better route, to it. Governments come and go. Leaders have different intentions, and that is it. Where I work for, the people that I work with, they are the ones who are being battered by insurgents in my country.
Mhm,
As a matter of fact, there are so many kids now who are not in school.
mhm.
They have moved them to IDPs, this displaced persons places. They are deluged. People, you just see them. And because of that, girl child is at risk. Because most of them, either they stray away or they take them away. Once they kidnap them, they force them to become wives. Kids at 10, 12, 13. Or, like, they ask for ransom. Most times, ransom are paid, but the kids don't get to return.
Mhm.
So for part of our work in Niger State, because education is about, child raising, because education is about creating opportunities for better days for the kids, for children, the Commissioner for Education is very, very serious about bringing these kids back to classroom. The kids out of school, when you hear numbers, they just create problems for you. So what we are doing now is the governor is using the Ministry of Education to create opportunities for expanded facilities in areas where there is peace, while they give the security agencies the chance to fight for peace in the areas that are conflicted. So my basic question actually is, while you're working for peace and comfort for people in these countries, have you had anyone, any country, okay, like your country, Liberia, have you had them record any amount of success with your steps? And if so, how has it been sustained, and what is the future? Because that bothers us here too.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. And certainly, we just focus on education. As you know, the UN right now, the focus is on the Sustainable Development Goals. So everybody's talking about that, whether we're in government, whether we're in corporations, the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so goal number 4, I believe, is education. All right. So how are countries doing with that? Every country is obligated to do a report on their advancement in all of these areas. And what we have found is that there are some countries where great progress has been made, not only by those governments, but by, say, UNICEF coming in and working with them, or through other, like CSOs. We have many women's organizations that have worked directly with schools. In fact, one organization I'm involved with is about to go next week, in fact, to Jamaica. We go to Jamaica, we go to Haiti, and we help in terms of giving supplies and educational materials and sustenance to schools. And mainly we focus on K through 12 schools because we know that that's an issue. However, the UN in Agenda 2030 had already, and in the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it declares that all children have the right to education. So when we have areas that are prohibiting that, or any entities that those are human rights violations, and those types of violations can be brought forward to the Human Rights Council of the UN. I mean, that's how high these go. But a lot of times people don't know that. They don't say, oh, well, this area, some of the schools are working and some of the schools aren't. And, but those are that's what we say are human. And once we label it, then we have some foundation to take action on it. All right. I was in, I guess, well, let me go back to, even if I take the example of Liberia, when there were so many students out of school, during the whole period of the war, and then even after. So we ended up having 2 to 3 generations, of children who did not go through the educational process. And that ends up impacting on other issues. So when you have a population that is more than 50% illiterate in terms of educational illiteracy, what do you expect in that society? They're going to find a way to survive. So whether they do it with you or against you, they're going to do that. So the key to a lot of the violence, a key to a lot of the other issues is education at the bottom. But of course, health comes in there. So, it's like a chicken and egg thing. And when we had Ebola, which disrupted the entire country. And then behind that, we then had COVID. So globally, what UNICEF has reported is we have now lost 5 years of advancement in terms of education because of COVID. Okay, and the students who are now back in school, we're finding, even in the US, right? We're finding that they are more than a year to 2 years behind in terms of skills in many areas. So we have civil unrest coupled with pandemics, and those two have colluded and to create some very detrimental environments. So the task becomes greater. So yes, UNICEF is doing all it can to try to address and reach these areas. Our UNAs are trying to address them, as I mentioned, by looking at what is the core reason. If they are human rights issues, then the UNAs have said, okay, we can try to work with other NGOs and bring this to the attention of the Human Rights Council. And so we have to approach these things in multiple perspectives. One, just saying, okay, we'll rely on the Ministry of Education to do something. And that ministry is a limited number, of staff. And in some instances, some of the factors that are involved, they're outside of the realm of that ministry. So how do you get all of this done, knowing that it has to be a collaboration of agencies within a country as well as among the international organizations that are equipped to assist that. So yes, so that becomes a critical problem. In terms of Nigeria, with the students being kidnapped, we see that in Haiti, and we saw it in Liberia and some other countries. That's where we have to reach out to governmental agencies, international organizations, and shine a light on what are the problems. What are the causes of these things? And are there agencies within the UN that this can be referred to present, assistance there? So human rights violations sometimes can warrant having UN missions sent in, to assist with that. But certainly shining the light and publicizing. So this is where international media can be so effective, so that we're putting it out front for the world to see, and the world takes interest in it and can assist. And these international organizations, both locally and internationally, can assist with that. But right now, in terms of where we are with the Agenda 2030 and our advancement in education, as I said, we're behind the ball on this one. And it's not a fault of our own necessarily, but certainly we've come through some very challenging times and factors. And we can't just say, well, woe is us. We have to be able to say, okay, this is what the reality is. So how do we move forward? How do we address these things and make sure that there are no other generations that are falling behind in those areas, and then accelerate those students who are currently caught, in this web, this time warp because of these issues that have occurred globally.
The UNAs, the United Nations associations that you guys kind of monitor or help organize around, how many are there of those? You might have said earlier on that.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, in terms, there are 100 over close to about 120 nations that have United Nations associations.
Okay.
So like the United Nations Association of America or United Nations Association of Nigeria.
Nationally, okay. Mm-hmm. I think there are inside the United States. I think there's some by state as well. Okay, I could be wrong, but I think there are some.
The United Nations Association of USA is comprised of smaller UNAs. So cities, mainly it's by cities. All of them are part of UNA USA. So in terms of the membership to World Federation, it is only the country's UNA.
Okay.
So there's only one UNA per country as a country UNA that's a member. But countries have various organizational structures within their UNA. Say with Nigeria, you may have a UNA in different regions, but all of them come together under UNA Nigeria. Or UNA, like UNA United Kingdom, there's a UNA Scotland, there's some others that
Yes.
come under that, yeah.
Yeah. And the way to find out if there is one in your area, is there a place on your website, on the Federation
Yeah.
website, that you can find that out? And
Yeah.
as far as getting involved, you would just contact the leader of the most local organization to you, right? And then
Right.
see how you would get involved in that.
Right.
So from that perspective, then what they do is sort of the more localized version of what the large organization does, which is keep tabs on what's going on locally, get involved, keep your ears to the ground, see what it is that you can do to find out from those local governments or whatever that needs to be addressed. From the different verticals that you guys get into,
Right.
which and are there different other than the peace? What are the verticals that you guys kind of tend to situate in? Peace, education, I guess, is one of them. Economic development.
Well, all of the SDGs, each
All the
UNA,
SDGs.
yeah, each UNA, whether it's the national one for that country or the sub ones, they have specific areas of interest and concern, and they intersect with other local CSOs and NGOs in their cities. So for
Okay.
instance, in Houston, we have a UNA Houston, okay?
Mhm.
Key issues here are immigration, refugee rights, you know,
Yes.
so it's very
Border.
specific.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so when those issues come up, then our UNAs in this area, they will say, okay, this is what we're going to address, and they will show up at city council meetings or show up at town hall meetings to express this is the stand of, you know, the UN.
Amazing. All right. Excellent. This is all good stuff to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it back over to Osita to see if you have another question, because we're probably
Yes,
getting close to the time.
because I am Nigerian, I live in Nigeria, I live in Africa. My question is, which region of the world, Africa, Asia, Pacific, and the rest of them, which region do you have your most presence, and why? I mean, is there any criterion for that kind of presence? Because I will be honest with you, I have heard about the UN, I have heard about so many things around international diplomacy and development, but I will have to look for the UNA, you know, the United Nations Association in Nigeria. I have not met anybody. I work for USAID, I work for UNDP, and I know that UNA must be here in Nigeria. I know that it must be here. So where do you have your most presence, and why? Is there anything that Africa could do to be able to increase that if we are not as much as others?
Yes. And I have met with the African UNAs. The African UNAs meet regionally to discuss how to make themselves more visible, how to increase the numbers in their countries. In some countries, the issue has to do with, it's not a whole lot of financial issue that's involved in it, but it's support. And of course, depending on the governments and how willing they are to allow or be supportive of UN organizations in those countries. But we have a great presence in terms of the number of UNAs. In fact, Africa as a continent has, of course, it has the most number of nations, and it has the most number of UNAs. And they communicate with each other periodically as a region in terms of increasing their activity, increasing their programming, and they do have regional programs, and we do a lot of Zoom, of course, to talk about. We did one around what was the last environmental conference. yeah, it's on the environmental issues, we talked about what's going on in the different regions of Africa. And then we also talked about, of course, right after COVID, we talked about medicines. That was the major one. And what other countries could assist in getting vaccinations or getting equipment to the countries. So the UNAs are to answer your question, they're very active. They just they need a little bit more publicity. Of course, all of it is, media driven in terms of how do people find out about the UNAs, and then getting support. And for the most part, they work with other groups within their countries. So that it may be that the most visible are those other groups, but the UNAs are supporting those groups
That makes
are in
sense.
the country. Yeah. So for instance, I'll go back to Liberia. Liberia, they're rejuvenating their UNA. It sort of fell apart because of everything that was going on, but there were a lot of women's organizations and women support for the women marketplace movement, women's leadership. So through that, it was able to assist in ways. But yes, we do want to increase. And I will tell you also in terms of impact, we also work with the African Union office here in the US. And Ambassador Hilda Sukumafutsa has been very open. This is our second year. We've had joint programming and discussions with her in terms of how throughout the diaspora, how can we work and do these things? So the UNAs have been able to talk with her, and then we've and in fact, the African Union has been very instrumental in terms of ensuring or making a way for more African representation, even on the UN Security Council. So they have come together and said, we recommend and we urge the UN Security Council to ensure that this representation is there, given that Africa has the most number of countries in the UN. So it's moving along in that way. But that's the way you would get in touch. And if you go to the World Federation of UNA's website, we have the world map there and the countries are designated. Many of the African countries may have, some are in transition. Some have been very stable, just as in any other place. Some have been very stable. So we are trying to strengthen through the WFUA office. We're trying to strengthen those organizations.
Great. Well, that's good.
Wonderful.
So sounds like another
Wonderful.
resource that we need to tap into. And certainly, Dr. Banks, we can be very helpful in making sure that we get more publicity out there for the UNAs between Osita and I. We certainly can help with that. I wanted to kind of get to any kind of personal vein that you may have running towards something that's important to you. I loved hearing you say that you're all about this organization going to take care of some school supplies and whatnot that is needed with this particular group. So it sounds like you're very hands-on involved in some of these activities. What might you be involved in right now that you feel like might need to open some doors, either in a geographic location, partnership in some regard, or basically just who might you need to meet, what types of people or where that you might need to meet to help you move the work that you guys are doing there, or what that you're doing personally?
Well, I mean, there's so many areas, and as I said, health and education are at the top for me. If you don't have health, then you can't educate people because they can't go to school, that type of back and forth. So organizations that are willing to assist in the increase of education, especially K through 12. And again, according to the declaration, and then also according to the UN agenda and UNICEF, K through 8 education was to be ensured by this point for all students. Okay, and we have not yet achieved that. And that is just so critical because their level of education is also going to affect their health eventually. You see what I'm saying? So organizations that are working on ensuring education for all students and ensuring health health services. So we lost many of for those countries that have been in conflict, they're losing health facilities, hospitals.
Oh my goodness, yes.
They're not able to, give the level, and even geographically in transportation. I know that Dr. Osita knows this. In many of our countries on the continent and in the Caribbean, people can't get to the facility. So we have to establish community centers or community health centers in smaller villages and all. We had a problem in, I believe it was Haiti. We were trying to get health supplies over to one of our communities, and it was a rainy season. So, unless you had certain type of vehicle to get. So anyway, the bottom line is not only do we have to make sure that the major hospitals have the equipment, but look at community health centers. And I will say that's even needed in the US.
Yeah.
So just as we have food deserts where there are not full grocery stores for healthy eating in many of our communities, we do not have close enough health services. And I have to give accolades to, there's one African-American woman physician in Detroit during COVID. She did a mobile hospital. She went into the communities, had some friends who were doctors. They took all of the medical supplies and treatments and services to the community because she knew they could not get to the hospitals. Okay. So we have to be, we have to look at the wider picture in terms of what are the reasons. And not say, oh, it's because those people they just don't know how to manage anything, or their governmental system isn't, So all of these external reasons, condemning the people themselves for their condition, that mindset has to end. There are veritable factors that are employed that present barriers for a lot of our people throughout the world.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we've got the marcher. I have somebody written over named Gail that I don't know if you know her already, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I want you, first of all, what you were just saying about being able to get to places. One of the things that I've got myself involved in, and Osita knows this, is in Malawi, there was a little island that was having trouble getting pregnant women to the mainland in time enough for their C-section birth, because it took about 45 minutes. And so babies were dying, women were dying. And a business partner of mine here in the United States, who's very active with Rotary Club, and I got together, and he and I, and along with another partner from Poland, it was an NGO in Poland, put together a business plan with another entity in Malawi. And basically we got the money together to get a motorized boat through Rotary International, paid for it, with about 4 different Rotary clubs put together, and got it. And we created a sustainable project with them. And so now we took a 45-minute trip down to about 15 minutes or less. And it can be used, when it's not used for that kind of emergency situation, it can be used as a water taxi for them. And literally, 2 weeks, I think, after the boat was ready to go and put in the water, they had a storm hit and a flood happened, and so they couldn't get anything unless they had the motorboat.
That's right.
So so it was really an interesting situation, but and we're looking to maybe replicate that in one other village that we know in a whole nother area of Africa. So it's amazing what it takes, and you cannot rely always on a government fix, and sometimes governments are not prepared to act quick enough. This whole thing came about within about 5 weeks.
Right. And the other, and I think you brought up this point earlier. We have to work with the government. We have to try to ensure, and put pressure on our governments. Do the right thing. Please do this, do this. But you also have to put pressure on our groundspeople, our civil society people. They're going to be there forever. Okay. Yeah. Governments are going to change. And depending on who comes in, and even here in the US, we don't know. So that's why it's very important that we support and that we create collaborations between these civil society organizations that will continue the work no matter what else is going on, external to that.
Right. Well, this has been an enlightening conversation, to say the least. And so I want to say thank you so much. Stay with me, if you will, but thank you so much, Dr. Banks and Dr. Osita Aniemeka. Thank you so much, my good friend, for being with us on this call. So I'll ask you guys to stay here for a second and say goodbye to everybody else. If you're watching this on the myriad of places you can get a podcast today, and you would like to have more information, go to our website, www.frontrunnersinnovate.com, where you'll get this interview and some more information, and maybe a link or two that will take you directly to the site that Dr. Banks has shared with us. And that way be a quick go for you. And you can figure out how you can get connected with the organization, either the one that she's involved with or the sub-organization, the UNAs that are out in your area. So thank you again very much. Till next time, Frontrunners Innovate says goodbye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Banks.
Thank you.